Shabbos. How are you? Nobody else wore red? No, I think it's. Is this great though? I don't know. I think it's fun. I think it's fun. Okay. All right. How was your journey back? Yeah, it sounded like it. Were you able to figure out what went wrong with the car? What went wrong with the car? Did you ever figure out? Short of whatever that makes no sense. I was just gonna say, who would do something like that? That's crazy. All right, hey Tom and Heidi, how you guys doing? Good. Yeah. Okay, so can we settle something for now? How do we pronounce the name of this flower? These flowers. How do we? No, I've been wondering forever. Okay, so the reason why I asked the question is because for the year that I lived in Los Angeles with Lou before we got married, there is a street there, and I used to take the bus. I'm literally the only person you'll ever meet who took the bus in Los Angeles. And one of the big roads there, the bus would always pronounce it poinsettia. And right, it's spelled that way. So my theory is that it's just one of those things where you have like a computerized version of something, and that somehow or another is the correct answer. But I don't know. But it really is nice. It's very festive. Very festive. Yeah, no, I think so. The real question is what they do with it afterward. That's what we were trying to figure out, is what happens to all these. Well, I like that. I like, reuse, right? That's a very important part of our existence right now. But I guess we should, our horticulturalist in the room, Andrew, you familiar with these flowers? Right, but are these, year-round things? Do they, because to me, if I were looking at them, I would assume that they were fake, right? They have like a wrinkle to them. They look. It's probably a good business. Oh, that's interesting. That's very interesting. Okay. See, you come to shul, you never know what you're going to learn. You never know. Good stuff. All right. Well, we'll see. Okay, Shabbat Shalom. Shabbat Shalom, Grossman. It's good to see you guys as well. Everybody have a nice end of the holiday? Good? Yeah. Well, it's better than the way it started. We were in the city this week, and my parents are, for the first time in the 50 years or so that they've been living in the apartment, are renovating some of it. So we haven't had a place to stay for a long time, and we had family friends who let us stay in their apartment on 88th Street. But it's in some apartments in the city, when you're running off a radiator heat, either it's way too hot or it's freezing cold, right? And so we got there, and it was freezing cold. It was like 60 degrees in the room. But it's all about perspective, right? And space heaters. Space heaters help also, but that's good too. Well, in any case, it's wonderful to see all of you. It's great to be back here, and as we look towards a new year, we'll talk a little bit more about that to come. We'll get started, and let's start. We haven't done this in a while. We'll sing our old little warm-up song. I think we need a little warming up tonight. Yallai la 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 yallai la 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 yallai la 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 yallai la la. Ay la 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 ay la 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 la. Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom. Okay, we'll turn to page 120 to light and bless our Shabbat candles, and page 120. I like action shots. You know, there is a taping video here. You ever want a picture of anything, you just tell me. I've got, 3 years. You mean me amongst the flowers? Is that what you're saying? I'll tell you what, next time I'm on the cover of a magazine, we'll send this in as the picture. I think that was, no, this photographer, she was fantastic. She was, really. All right, one last time. I'm a sucker. That's where you get to read it. Well, we are an ecumenical bunch, that's for sure. Okay. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu להדליק ner shel Shabbat. Amen. I have to keep reminding you guys about the amen part. It's very important. Very important. I can't say amen to my own blessings. That's where you guys come in. Amen. Very good. Excellent. All right, we'll give a sermon about that another time. Page 130, we'll get started with Kabbalat Shabbat at the very top of the page. Lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena l'Adonai. Lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena l'Adonai. Naria, naria, letzori shenu nekadma fanav betodah. Naria, naria, letzori shenu bizmirot naria lo. Lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena l'Adonai. Lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena, lechu ner hanena l'Adonai. We'll turn now to page 131, Shiru l'Adonai, which is just in the middle of the page. Shiru l'Adonai, shiru shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai, kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. Shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. Shiru l'Adonai, shiru shir chadash, shiru l'Adonai kol haaretz. Shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. Shiru l'Adonai baruchu shemo, basru meyom leyom yeshuato. We'll turn now to page 132, or Zarua, which is just at the very bottom of the page, again, page 132. Or zarua latzadik, uleishrei lev simcha. Or zarua latzadik, uleishrei lev simcha. Simechu tzadikim b'Adonai, vehodu lezecher kodsho. Simechu tzadikim b'Adonai, vehodu lezecher kodsho. We'll turn now to page 134, at the very top of the page, again, page 134. Zamru l'Adonai bechinor, bechinor bekol zimra, b'chatzotzrot bekol shofar. Ahariu lifnei hamelech Adonai, Yiram hayam umlo. Tebehel ve'yoshveva, Nehar עמך וכף יחד הרים ירננו. לפני אדוני קיווה לשפוט הארץ. ישפוט תבל בצדק ועמים במישרים. ירם הים ומלואו תבל ויושביה. נהרות עמך וכף יחד harim yiranenu. We'll now turn to page 135, Romamu, which is the last Hebrew paragraph just in the middle of the page. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu romemu. Romemu Adonai Eloheinu ve'ishtachavu lehar kodsho. We'll turn now to Lecha Dodi on page 138. We'll do the first, second, fifth, and ninth paragraph. And again, for the last one, we'll rise and face towards the rear of the room. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. 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 Shamor v'zachor b'dibur echad. Ishmianu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad l'shem u'tiferet ve'litila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha. Ki mekor haberacha meherosh mikedem nesucha. Sof maaseh b'machshavat tchila. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Hitoreri ki ba'orech kumi uri shir daberi kevod Adonai alayich nigla. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Lecha Dodi likrat kala penei Shabbat nekabela. Bohi b'shalom ateret bala. Gam besimcha uvetzola. Toch emunei am segula. Bohi chala. Lecha Dodi Lecha dodi likrat kalam, Penei Shabbat nekabelam. Lecha dodi likrat kalam, Penei Shabbat nekabelam. Please be seated. We're now on page 140, Tzaddik Tamar, which is just where the Hebrew indents in the middle of the page. Tzaddik Tamar yifrach, Keres Balvanon Yiske Shetulim Beveit Adonai Bechatzrot Eloheinu Yafrichu Od Yenuvun Beseba Deshenim Verananim Ihu Lehagim Ki Ashar Adonai Tzuri Velo Hablatabo. We'll now rise in body or spirit for the Chatzi Kaddish on page 144 and remain standing through the Baruch Hu on the next page. Yitkadal vehitkadash shemei Rabbah B'alma divrach chirutei b'amlich machutei B'chayechon u'v'yomechon u'v'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael Ba'galaha Ubizman kariv veimeru. Amen. Yeheshmei Rabba mevarach le'alam li'al me'al maya yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitbar v'yitromaham v'yitnasei v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shemei dekudsha brichu Leila min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechemata damiran behalma v'imeru. Amen. Baruch Hu et Adonai hamevorach. Baruch Adonai hamvorach leolam va'ed. Please be seated. We'll turn now to page 149. Let's read together in English at the bottom of the page. This is an hour of change. Within it we stand uncertain on the border of light. Shall we draw back or cross over? Where shall our hearts turn? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? This is the hour of change, and within it we stand quietly on the border of light. What lies before us? Shall we draw back, my brother, my sister, or cross over? Umavir yom umevi laila, umavdihil ben yom uven laila, Adonai tzvahot shemo, El chai v'kayam tamid yimloch aleinu leolam va'ed, Baruch atah Adonai, Amahari Barhavi. We'll turn now to page 151, and we'll read at the very top of the page together. As you taught Torah to those whose names I bear, teach me Torah too. Its mystery beckons, yet I struggle with its truth. You meant Torah for me. Did you mean the struggle for me too? Don't let me struggle alone. Help me to understand, to be wise, to listen, to know. Lead me into the mystery. Ki ehem chayenu ve'orech yameinu, v'hem negei yomam v'layla, Balatcha al tasir mimenu liolamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Please join me on page 154. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להיות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, Adonai Elohechem Emet. We'll turn now to page 157, and we'll read together in English at the very top of the page. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before ever we stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands and marching together. As we turn to page 158. Yabai bai bim 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 bam, yabai bai bim bam, yabai bai bim 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 bam, yabai bai bim bam, yabai ba 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 ba, yabai bai bim bam, yabai ba 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 ba, yabai bai bim bam. Mi chamocha bailim Adonai, mi kamocha nedar bakodesh, norat hilot osefele, norat hilot osefele. Yabai bai bim 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 bam, yabai bai bim bam, yabai bai bim 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 bam, yabai bai bim bam. Yai bye ba 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 bye ya ba bye bye bim bam. Yai bye ba 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 bye ya ba bye bye bim bam. Malchutecha ra'u vanecha bokeam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam zeli anu ve'amru Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. V'nemar kifad Adonai et Yaakov ugalo miad chazak mimenu Baruch atah Adonai Gal Yisrael. Let there be love and understanding among us, peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Adonai, help us to walk with good companions, to live with hope in our hearts and eternity in our thoughts, that we may lie down in peace and rise up, waiting to do your will. Hashkivenu is on page 160. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom v'hamidenu shomreinu lechaim. Ushmor tzeiteinu uvoeinu lechaim u'shalom me'ata ve'ad olam. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu leshalom ve'amidenu shomreinu lechaim. Blessed are you, Adonai, guardian of Israel, whose shelter of peace is spread over us, over all your people Israel, and over Yerushalayim. We'll turn now to page 162, V'shamru at the very top of the page. V'shamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat La'asot et ha-Shabbat Ledorotam berhit olam Einai beini ubein bnei Yisrael oti le'olam Ki sheishet yamim hasa Adonai et hashamayim ve'et haaretz uvayom hashevim Shabbat, Shabbat vayinafash. I'll invite us now to rise in body or in spirit as we begin the Amidah together on page 164. From that point on, we'll continue silently as we always do. And if you're standing at the end, you may be seated. Adonai sefatai tiftach ufi yagid tehilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Ose shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol Yehoshvei tevet. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. We'll turn now to page 371 as we offer our Misha Berach for this evening. And as a community tonight, we're thinking of Bentzi Tepper, Allison Luckman, Malka Bat-Chaya Sura, Michael Klinghoffer, Amy and Warren Cass, Rivka Bat Rachel, Leah Bat Naomi, Gedalia Ben Sylvia, Lorraine Danis, David Dowling, Sivia Devora, Bat Francis, Muriel Hirsch, Michelle Sawicki, Francis Kirschman, Shelley Newmark, Diane Axelrod, Gabriella Rose Spicer, Barbara Kushner, David Kyle Klopman, Lorraine Davis, Machoil Ben Chananya, Devora Batsima, Rebecca Snyder, Jeffrey Miller, Shelley Lyman, Deborah Block-Kroll, Sylvia Orn, Stanley Rappaport, Karen Layton, Debbie Bookvar, Carol Javna, Lori Nissenson, Roberta Kyle, Miriam Batchaya, Dina Batchana, Mindy Cantor, and Mimi Levy. In addition to the names that I just shared, we'll invite those that are with us here this evening to share names if you would choose. We'll start on this side of the room and then to this side, and of course we'll welcome those who are watching at home to add names for your loved ones as well. We'll join together in the Misha Berach in the middle of page 371. Misha Berach Avotenu Mekor HaBracha Leimotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishe Beirach Imotenu Mekor HaBracha Lavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. Good Shabbos, everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and a happy almost New Year. Now, I'm going to talk to you about New Year's because it seems like an appropriate time. And, we as Jews, we always take the simple and make it complex. And I think actually when it comes to New Year's, we are the most complex people on the planet as far as I can tell. Now, some of you may be surprised to know. Well, if I were to ask you, what is our New Year? What is the Jewish calendar? What's our New Year? Okay, don't whisper it. You know it very confidently. All right, you say it loud. Rosh Hashanah. Okay, we already did it. Should be relaxed about it. Okay. What if I were to tell you, in fact, that the Torah doesn't give us actually one option for New Year's, but it gives us a few? Two in particular, and then the rabbis later on decide to make it even more complex than that. So does anyone know when the other New Year's is? Yeah. Okay, good. This is, again, I ask these questions to make sure I'm teaching you something new. Okay, if our presidents don't know the answer to this, then I feel like I'm on the right track here. So let's start with the simple. We'll start with Torah. Okay, in Exodus, we're told, chapter 12, and God spoke to Moses and Aaron in the land of Egypt, saying, this month, and in this case is referring to the Hebrew month of Nisan, this month shall be to you the beginning of months. It shall be the first month of the year to you. Okay, so if I was describing this, you would assume which holiday are we talking about? Okay, how many of you say Rosh Hashanah? Okay, you're all wrong. Okay, month of Nisan, right? But it's a very logical answer. Okay, very logical. Month of Nisan is in the spring. Okay, so can we think of a spring holiday that might actually also make a certain kind of sense for a new year? Very good. Now, why would we maybe think of that holiday of all holidays and associate it as a new something? Think to the story. What happens in the story of Passover? What's going on? Ron, I see a hand up. Don't be shy. Liberation. Excellent. Okay? And liberation in particular of what? A people. Okay? A people. So another way of thinking about this really is it's the beginning of our national identity. Okay? So Rosh Hashanah, when we talk about one of our themes is that it's the celebration of creation itself. Right? That's its kind of callback. Whereas in the month of Nisan, the holiday of Passover, we're calling back to a different kind of beginning. Right? The beginning of us is not just, Abraham and his kids and his kids' kids, but us is something that we eventually identify ourselves as Israelites and eventually, as we call ourselves today, the Jewish people. Okay, so we have in Exodus, right, this one version. In Leviticus, we get the other one, the one that we know as Rosh Hashanah. It says, speak to the children of Israel, saying, in the 7th month, on the first day of the month shall be a solemn rest to you, a memorial proclaimed with the blast of horns, a holy convocation. You shall do no manner of work. You shall bring an offering made by fire unto God. Okay, so the oddity of it all is that we celebrate Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of our new year, what we all consider to be the beginning of the new year, our calendar, the whole business, and we find out that it is not in the first month, but it's in the 7th month of the calendar, which is correct. The month of Tishrei, if you count in the Hebrew calendar, is in fact the 7th month. Okay, so it's already something complex. Now I'm going to throw you for even further. There are 2 more. Okay, there's 2 more New Year's. So, get ready. So we go to the Talmud, we go to the Mishnah in particular, and we're told a little bit this will be a reconning of the stuff that we've talked about already. Okay, there's 4 days in the year that serve as a new year, each for a different purpose. Okay, on the first of Nisan, the one we just talked about, right, Passover, is the new year for kings. So in the period of time in which we had kings, queens, this was the regnal year. Basically, the year of reignings was determined by this particular moment in time, which makes sense, again, when thinking about that New Year's, that Pesach-related New Year's, as our national identity, celebrating and acknowledging the beginning of, right, the national leadership in the form of a king, would make less sense to do when we're thinking about creation and God, okay? So it wouldn't make sense to celebrate the beginning of a new regnal year on Rosh Hashanah. This is what we do in the month of Nisan. This is what we do in Passover. This is how we count the years for kings, okay? It's from that date that the years of a king's rule are ultimately counted. And for the first of Nisan is also the new year for the order of the festivals. So in case any of you were thinking, let's say, right, if you're assuming that Rosh Hashanah is the new year, what would you assume of the festivals, of the 3, right, of Sukkot, of Pesach, and of Shavuot, which would be the first of those holidays in a given year? What comes closely after Rosh Hashanah? Sukkot, okay? Sukkot is actually the last of the festivals, okay? Pesach is the first, Shavuot is the second, okay? Sukkot is actually the end point, okay? So it's already throwing you off completely. I can see a lot of confused looks. That's good, okay? From confusion, we learn. Okay, on the first of Elul, this is now a new one, is the new month for animal tithing. Okay, so the month of Elul is the month that precedes Rosh Hashanah, and we're told on the first of that is when they would determine which animals were to be used for tithing. In other words, which would be given to the temple as part of the expectation of annual giving. And that makes sense given the way in which animals are generally born in the springtime and of an appropriate age for sacrifice by the point in which. So it makes sense you count them at that point in time. And on the first of Tishrei, as we talked about, is the new year for counting years, as will be explained in the Gemara later on. So this means calculating, as I said, for creation, right? When we get to Rosh Hashanah, what's one of the first things we do during that service? We acknowledge the new year, 5782, 5783, and so forth. Okay, we may be a little bit off on the number of years we've been in creation, but we'll, give the benefit of the doubt. But it's not just those years that are counted. It's also the means by which we determine when a sabbatical year takes place and when ultimately a jubilee year takes place, a yovel, 7 sets of 7 years of the Shemitah years. Okay, so it's basically the way in which we determine, as I said, what year it is in the way that we tend to think about years. Okay, and then last, there is also we're told at the beginning, the first of Shvat, there is a new year for the trees. Okay, that's a little bit off. That was Beit Shammai's perspective. Hillel says actually it's the 15th, and that's why we get Tu B'Shvat. The word tu is actually just the Hebrew letters that amount to 15. Okay, so 15. So basically we have 4 New Years. Okay, we have a New Year's in Nisan, tied to the holiday of Pesach, helps us to count the years of kingship and to acknowledge the beginning of our nationhood. We have a New Year's in Tishrei, which is what we call Rosh Hashanah, the beginning of our celebration of creation itself, and the New Years ultimately that are determined for sabbatical and for Jubilee and so forth. We have another New Year for the tithings of animals, and we have another New Year for the beginnings of trees and all of the laws that are associated with that. Okay. So it seems like a pretty simple, straightforward thing. Of course not, because the rabbis love to argue, and especially in the Talmud, they like to argue even more. So in Masechet Rosh Hashanah, the section of the Talmud that deals with these questions, we actually get 2 different perspectives. Okay, it was taught that by Rabbi Eliezer that in Tishrei the world was created, in Tishrei the forefathers were born, in Tishrei the forefathers died. During Passover, Yitzchak was born. During Rosh Hashanah, Sarah, Rachel, and Hannah were remembered. During Rosh Hashanah, Joseph left the dungeon. Right, they're trying to give all sorts of explanations as to why this particular time is the right time to celebrate. But Rabbi Joshua disagrees. He says that it was actually in Nisan that the world was created, right? He's arguing that the Passover New Year is really the one about creation. In Nisan, the patriarchs were born. In Nisan, the patriarchs died. On Passover, Isaac was born. On Rosh Hashanah, Sarah, Rachel, and Hannah were visited, so on and so forth. And they basically come to a disagreement. One says that really the New Year creation is in Nisan. One is in... And part of this is because the Torah is somewhat enigmatic about a lot of this. And so they get into a whole argument of which we won't go into the minutiae of it, but there actually isn't a clear resolution in the Talmud itself, but we know how it ultimately plays out, right? We know that the holiday that's known as a New Year in Nisan, we don't think of it in that way, really, right? When we celebrate Pesach, are any of you marking a new year of any sort? Do you ever remember doing that? Have we ever done it in shul? Is it even on our radar? No. Okay, in the end, we think of Rosh Hashanah truly as our New Year. But the reality is that actually, we hold on to all of them. Each one of them has a purpose. Each one of them has a significance. And while there is some disagreement amongst the rabbis as to what the purpose is and when in particular it is appropriate to celebrate, they leave both ideas in place. Okay, let's say of the two major holidays, okay, the two major New Years, I would say. They leave both of these ideas in place in the Talmud, and they leave the argument there. So why is this relevant? So I'm going to share with you a teaching from Rabbi Izmar Shoresh, who I don't imagine many of you know that name, but actually one of the most significant rabbis of the last 75 years, probably even a century. He was the former chancellor of the Jewish Theological Seminary, the center of learning of the conservative movement, one of the most influential rabbis in American Jewish history, period. So he wrote on this, on a commentary on the Parsha in which some of this comes into play. He says as follows: the existence of two New Years echoes the long-forgotten debate of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yoshua, the ones that we just talked about in the Talmud. What united them is that neither rabbi called for the adoption of a calendar with but a single New Year. They argued over which was primary and which was secondary. But to its credit, Judaism incorporated both. The newer holy days of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, okay, and that may surprise you, but in Torah thinking, the festivals are the most important holidays. Passover, Shavuot, Sukkot. Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are minor holidays. Okay, to us, we think of them in the complete reverse, right? So, to its credit, right, Judaism incorporates both. These newer holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur do not overwhelm the older pilgrimage festival of Passover. Together, both sacred seasons express the fullness of human need. In the spring, we join with family and friends to celebrate the rebirth of our people. Nature and history converge in a burst of new vigor, of hope and creativity. We have a need to belong, to attach our lives to something greater and more lasting than ourselves, to find meaning beyond the self. But the self, says Rabbi Shoresh, is not to be denied. It must find some sacred solitude within the totality of community and peoplehood. And so we gather again in the fall, being Rosh Hashanah, against the backdrop of a natural world that is beginning to wither, in order to contemplate what the passage of time means in our own lives. As in so many other areas, Judaism strives for balance, keeping polarities in creative tension. The phenomena of two New Years, focused on the nation and the individual, and promoting the values of particularism and universalism, is not an isolated instance. Judaism offers an unending dialectic between polarities, such as priest and prophet, law and psalm, a written Torah and an oral one, or better yet, a canon without closure, halacha and agadah, rationalism and mysticism, and the centrality of the land of Israel and the accommodation to life in exile. In sum, says Rabbi Shoresh, Judaism is a glorious prism that refracts God's light in a rainbow of human expressions. So what is Rabbi Shoresh ultimately talking about? Why is this relevant? And why is it relevant to our secular New Year? How does this all ultimately play together? I think what Rabbi Shoresh is saying, and he ultimately is just reflecting on what the rabbis of the Talmud have discussed, is that we have multiple identities. We have multiple ways of experiencing life, and a New Year's is an opportunity to take stock and to reflect on a particular passage of time. And imbuing that New Year's with a certain kind of meaning means that you don't have to have one over the other or one to the exclusion of the other. You simply have to ask questions as to what is the purpose of these various New Years. Why do we have them, and why are they still relevant to us after all of these years? And why do we need to think of them in that kind of way? And I think those deep questions, right? What is the purpose of all of these celebrations, all of these New Years, is actually very relevant to this time of year and to this holiday that we're going to celebrate this weekend. Because like many holidays, especially over time, they become nothings, right? They become excuses for frivolous things, right? Popping off a bottle of champagne, putting on a silly hat, trying to stay up till midnight, which for me is virtually impossible, right? All of these things that they're not nothing. They're not nothing, okay? They're meaningful to all of us, right? My kids are going to love all of this stuff, right? Your grandkids all going to love this kind of stuff. But in the end, New Year's is actually an opportunity. It really is a very deep opportunity for us, even in a secular world, to consider what has this last year been? What have we been in it? And what is this precipice moment that tells us we have a chance to perhaps change or to grow or for the next year to provide us with something that the previous year didn't? Right? What do you see at the end of the year all the time? You see people ranking this, or everything I got today, every blip on my phone was about how bad the stock market was this year, and there's no question. Okay, it was terrible. It killed all of us. Okay, for sure. But to fixate on these things, to me, is a simplistic reality. And I think the depth of what our Jewish New Years are trying to tell us is something actually much more substantial. And I think we can actually work backwards in this way. We can take some of what we've learned about how we celebrate New Year's in Judaism, and we can apply it in a secular world. We can apply it in a world in which every year we get to this point and we all say we're going to be different next year, we're going to do different things, and then Monday or Tuesday comes around and we're the same group, right? The world keeps sort of spinning in the same kind of way. But the truth is that that's a decision that we make. It's a decision to give up on our dreams for something different, for something better. And I think because the only way that we celebrate New Year's tends to be in a sort of frivolous kind of way, that we don't really imbue this holiday with the kind of meaning that I think it potentially can have. And I think for me, as I've studied the rabbis and they're going over this over and over and over again, it would have been so much easier to just say, we got one New Year. What's all this rest of this stuff? Be done with it. Right? Rabbis of the Talmud could have easily written off all of these things for various ways, and yet they kept them. And they kept them because each one of them actually serves an important purpose, that there is a narrative to them, that there is a consciousness to them. And I think that we can do the same for what's coming up this weekend as well. I think we can really try to look at this time as not just about celebration and family and all those great things, right? Those are wonderful, and we should love that, but maybe just that one extra step that says, I'm actually going to take this period of time seriously this year. And I'm really going to give some thought to what this last year looked like for me, for my community, for the whole world. And I'm going to look at next year and say, I may not be able to change everything about myself. I may not be able to change everything about the world that I live in. But I'm going to pick at least one thing that I want to do differently next year, one that's going to benefit not just myself, but the people I share my life with and my world with. And it's one of those things where if enough people sit down and do this, and enough people act upon it, and if enough people even change the one thing, if you are able to do that in a collective fashion, the world can change, and it can change overnight. And you can call me an optimist, you can call me a dreamer, but why not? Why not? Why not dream with me, right? Why not think of something better? Because if we're really honest, this last year has been very tough. It's been very tough in a lot of ways. And I think there's a lot of space for us to grow and to change and to be better. So I hope that in some way, maybe our fifth New Year of the way to approach it is, sometimes you have to increase the number to increase your odds. Hopefully this will increase the odds to our success. So with that, I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a very, very happy, healthy New Year for all of you, for your loved ones, for our community, and for our world. Shabbat Shalom. All right, so we'll turn back to our Sidurim, to our prayer books, page 586, and we'll rise either in body or in spirit. Aleinu l'shabeach. Aleinu l'shabeach l'adon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kegoye haratzot, velo samanu kemishpachot ha'adama, shelo samach elkeinu kahem, vegor aleinu kechol hamonam, vanachnu korim, ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך מלכי המלכים הקדוש ברוך הוא. Page 591. ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ושמו אחד. We'll turn now to page 597 and we'll read together in English at the very bottom of the page. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. I'll invite those in mourning, those observing yahrzeit to remain standing. Everyone else may be seated at this time. We think first of those who've passed in our community in recent months: Martin Blake, Lynn Cowan, Arlene Eber, Chaim Bear Greenwald, Sandy Greenwald, Jane Beard Cass, Gertrude Katz, Buddy Kossoff, Helene Krotman, Manuel Kiprios, David Lieberman, Sandra Tromberg Luongo, Norma Polsek, Marvin Schreier, David Senf, Anita Sheldon, Alan Silver, Sandy Slip, Larry Wartor, Rita Weitzman, Matthew Adam Zimmerman, and Yael Zerdar. We also mark the yahrzeits that occurred during the last week for Ida Abelman, Gladys Abraham, Alex Alexander, Rosella Baskind, Gloria Brandt, Frank Britz, Frank Cohen, Ruben Daphner, Miriam de Rothschild, Faith Diskin, Joseph Epstein, Thomas Nash Glynn, Howard Graham, Carrie Grossman, Caroline Harrison, Philip Heller, Ida Hilkowitz, Irving Hirschberg, Mark Joseph, Arthur Kaplan, Ing Leopold, Frank Lester, Raymond Levin, Jacques Nouvel, Stephen Osofsky, Gelta Rubin, Molly Sent, and Timothy Verdon. Is anyone else saying Kaddish for anyone tonight that we didn't mention? I'll invite those who choose to do so to rise in body or spirit, and I'll ask the mourners to join with me on page 598. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, be'alma divra chirutei v'yamlich malchutei, b'chayechon uvyomechon uv'chayei dechol Beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach la'alam u'li'almei almaya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yithadar v'yit'aleh v'yithalal shemei dekudsha brichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata tushbechata v'nechamata da'amiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yeheh shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Zichronam livracha, may every one of their memories be for blessing. Okay, please be seated. Again, good Shabbos, everybody. Yes, yes. Okay, good question. So for those that couldn't hear, Neil asked the question as to why we recite the Kaddish traditionally for only 11 months when it would seem much more logical, speaking about years, to go the full 12 months. One, because I think we are just, wonderfully countercultural people in our essence. But there actually is a whole explanation of which I'll try to give you the minute version as opposed to the hour version. So Judaism has a very cloudy vision of the afterlife, right? Whereas certain religions have a very clear image of process and what it looks like. Depending on what point in history, which book you're looking at, you get very different views of things. But one of the sort of rabbinic views is that when we die, we go to something of a purgatory-ish place, okay? A place basically that we are in, and depending on how we lived our lives, we're either there, for example, take the best guy who ever lived, right? Take a Moses, for example. Moses is there basically for an instant, right? A fraction of a second, okay? Then you take the worst person that ever lived, and they're there basically for 11 months. So if you were to, for example, say Kaddish, right, the whole point of saying Kaddish traditionally is that you are, in essence, doing it on the behalf of the person who's passed away this is one of the views of the reason why to say Kaddish, to accelerate the person that you love who's in this place so that they move through it faster and they move to Gan Eden and to the ultimate life faster. So if you were to, for example, say Kaddish for somebody for 12 months, you would be in effect saying this is for the worst person who ever lived, right? Because if 11 months is the limit, this is somebody who went even longer than that. So the idea is you say it for 11 months to cover your bases, because we can't know how long our loved ones are up there. But anything beyond that would be, in essence, a way of insulting a person who's passed away. So it's, again, very counterintuitive and very complicated because, right, this actually just came up this week for someone who had written and was actually very concerned because I hadn't said the name of their loved one for the last several weeks. And I had explained that it's because of this system, essentially, where they got a letter in the mail saying that the name would be read tonight, but for the last 3 weeks hadn't heard anything, and it's because 11 months had concluded, but in that first year, your first yahrzeit is exactly at the 12-month period. So it is an excellent question, of which some of it I would find personally compelling, and some of it I think is just a tradition that's existed for long enough that it becomes like it's law. But that basically is its rabbinic real origin. And the truth is, like the Kaddish as a prayer, right? You won't find the Kaddish anywhere in the Torah. You won't find it anywhere in the Tanakh. It didn't exist then. It's primarily in Aramaic, which is a language that didn't even exist at that point. So it tells you that all of these things are largely constructs of rabbinic Judaism. And if you think about it, it's actually a wonderfully powerful. Anyone who's had the experience, for example, of saying Kaddish for 11 months for somebody who they love, will tell you that it connects you to that person in a very deep and powerful way. Even if you're not saying it every day or 3 times a day, the idea that this is part of kind of what you do. And I always say that I think the rabbis were way ahead of their time, right? The rabbis of the Talmud were talking about between 200 and 500 CE in terms of understanding the human psyche of what we need as people in grief. Right? We can't just roll over a week later and go back to life as if nothing has changed. And we also can't spend the rest of our lives in grief because we'll never live. So the construct of 7 days, of 30 days, of 11 months, of a recurring yahrzeit, of Yizkor services that appear several times a year, right? These are all layers of ways of thinking, at some point in history it says, how can we help people through this most terrible experience of losing a loved one? And I think this idea of 11 months is a way of saying, go to the furthest extent without going to the end, right? In other words, remember your loved ones, but also remember that you have to go back to life at some point or another as well. So that stopping short of the full year is kind of a way of saying, right, you've done to 11 months, and now there's this kind of month of self-reflection before the first yahrzeit, and then you're now into a different kind of cycle of remembrance. But it's an excellent question, Neil, and I think I took more than my minute to answer, but hopefully gave some insight there, probably also some additional confusion, but that's part of my fun in this job for sure. So, a few announcements to us before we conclude our service and do Kiddush. First is, of course, to join us for Shabbat services tomorrow morning. If you want to join us in person, you can join us here at the Old Whalers Church. Just remember to enter through the side and to come into the chapel, not the sanctuary. Services will begin at 9:30. You can also join us on Zoom, our website, YouTube channel, or Facebook page. And also, of course, a reminder to join us for Torah study on Zoom at 12 o'clock, and a reminder that next Shabbat will be our first Shabbat of the month, and so we'll be doing our Women's Torah Commentary Torah study, this time led by Myra Peskowitz, our wonderful teacher. Also, just a reminder that there are no classes or meetings this Monday, as the building will be closed, right? I think. It is a holiday, I guess. We were open, right? But New Year's, I think, is a different, well, here we end up back at our conversation from earlier, right? How do we treat? This is what I'm reading off my list. If you need something on Monday, you call me. Put it to you that way. Good? Good. Also, a reminder, several really great things coming up this month. January 12th, we have a virtual presentation on Zoom, an update of our building renovation progress, and not just on an update on the progress, but also a great chance to really meet our architect, Bill Chaliff, our project manager, Tom Ackerman, and I believe Buddy is also going to be on the call, right? Buddy Wines, the owner of the building company, RLW4, and perhaps some other guests, and some pictures, and some videos, and all sorts of stuff to get us excited for the new building, which is coming soonish. Okay. But come springtime, who needs the heat? We'll be okay. We'll be all right. Exactly. Springtime. but we're very excited about that. And it's a great way also to show the people who've been working so hard on it that we want to know who they are too. Okay, because the builders really matter a great deal. And I will tell you this, everybody who's worked on this building, everybody who's worked on this renovation over there, they really care about it. You know, they're doing this work not just because they're getting paid for it, but I think they feel proud of it. It'll be a part of this community for a long time to come, and I think that's really something to celebrate. Also, sorry. Sure. Yeah, I was gonna say, you want the mic? Here, I'll come to you. That's the beauty of wireless mics. We can move. They won't. I'll tell you what. If you come to right about here, they'll see you. They should see you.
So I think I was there today. I think it was, days blend in. But Dr. Phil Lankowski was there, and he made some really good suggestions. There's a brick wall that was about to be covered up. It's an original brick wall. And he said, no, let's just clean up the brick and leave it. And he had a few other suggestions. So anyone who wants to come and visit and make suggestions, we'll try to incorporate them if they make sense. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to teach you another really important phrase in Judaism. It's bli neder. Okay, the word neder means a vow. So generally speaking, when you make a thing, as Neil just said, we'll take suggestions, whether we're going to do them or not. We say bli neder, no promises. Okay, no promises. But that's great, Neil. That's very exciting. I love that brick. I think that's fantastic. Well, I do love the Lenskowskis too, so that's wonderful. Okay, another thing to celebrate and to acknowledge, of course, the marking of Martin Luther King Day. We are going to join together with a number of our sister congregations, brother congregations in the area, hosted by the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of the South Fork. On the Sunday, January 15th at 4 p.m., the day before King Day, we're going to do a ecumenical interfaith service marking the day and marking the significance again of King and his impact both in his lifetime and the impact that is ultimately carried forward since his passing, since his life was taken. Also to acknowledge, on Wednesday, January 18th at 11 a.m., this is where those are able to are going to meet me in New York City, and we're going to have a docent-led tour of the New York Historical Society's new exhibit on the Jewish Deli, followed by an optional, if you want to come, lunch at the 2nd Avenue Deli with me afterwards, so we'll come across town. And there are even vegetarian options at the deli from what I'm told these days. You can even get vegetarian stuff. So don't hold back. I hope that you'll join me, and it should be a lot of fun. And other things coming up in January, so keep your eye on the calendar, and a lot of good stuff to celebrate for sure. Good start to the new year, that is without a doubt. Did I miss anything else? Anything, Ron, any message from the president? Yes. Well, Shelley's been already, which is for sure, and of course, as was Eileen's last day today as well, as I wrote in the letter to the congregation, and and in time we'll be able to introduce you to Deb, who is our new office manager, who is just wonderful, and I really want to thank Ron and Gail and Marilyn Zaretsky, who really were key in interviewing and finding and vetting until we found somebody who I think is really not just a good fit in terms of her technical skills, but her neshama, as it were, her essence, and she's really already been really wonderful to work with. So a lot of good things coming up, a lot of really wonderful things coming up for sure. So before we do Kiddush tonight, why don't we do Shalom Aleichem, which is on page 627. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mihi Melech Malachei Hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon. Mihi melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. Baruchuni leshalom malachei hashalom malachei elyon. Mihi melech malchei hamlachim hakadosh baruch hu. Tzedchem leshalom, malachei hashalom, malachei elyon. Mihi melech malchei hamlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Kiddush is on page 123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam b'horei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho b'ahava uvratzon enchilanu zikaron l'maseh v'reishit ki hu yom techila l'mikrae kodesh zecher l'tziat mitzrayim כי בנו בחרת, ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, בשבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, מקדש השבת. Amen. Okay, Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend, a wonderful New Year's. Join me tomorrow for services, 9:30. I'll see you there, Neil, right? Absolutely, absolutely. Okay, good Shabbos, everybody. Oh, wait, Motzi. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. All right. Also, if you can please bring your Sederim, your prayer books back to Josie on your way out, that would be much appreciated. And Shabbat Shalom. I'm sure nobody wants to hear me chewing on the microphone. That probably is not pleasant.